right, before we sing the next chorus, Dad, could I get you to open in prayer for us? Praise the Lord. Hallelujah. What numbers I rejoice when they said to me? 304. 304, please, Nath. Should we do we start off with the chorus? Okay. Okay. After 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I rejoice when they said to me, let us go to the house of the Lord. Let's sing 310, Spirit Filled. All right. After 3. 1, 2, 3. Spirit filled. Reconcile. After three. After three. 1, 2, 3. Oh yes, I love that man of Galilee, Galilee. For he's done so very, very much for me. He's forgiven all my sin. Praise the Holy Ghost within. Oh yes, I love that man of Galilee. Down on my knees, I found the Savior. Down on my knees, I found the Lord. Not on a mountain, nor in a valley, but on my knees, I found the Lord. And again. Oh yes, I love that man of Galilee, Galilee. For he's done so very, very much for me. He's forgiven all my sin. Praise the Holy Ghost within. Oh yes, I love that man of Galilee. Down on my knees, I found the Savior. Down on my knees, I found the Lord. Not on a mountain, nor in a valley, but on my knees, I found the Lord. Quick favourite. Sandra. 6, 1, 8. There we go. And yes, you can do the offbeat claps. This one. After 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. We decide to be wise. Thus us in your understanding. Give us your wisdom and the knowledge of your will. Let us walk worthy and be pleasing in your sight. Fruitful in every good work, increasing by your might. Saints walking in the light, our fullness is in you, Lord. Standing steadfast and immovable, be reconciled unto you. And again. We desire to be wise. Bless us in your understanding. Give us your wisdom and the knowledge of your will. Let us walk worthy and be pleasing in your sight. Fruitful in every good word, increasing by your might. Saints walking in the light, our fullness is in you, Lord. Standing steadfast and immovable, be reconciled unto you. We've been reconciled unto you. We've been reconciled unto you. 6, 2, 4. Take us to the river. What was? Did we already do this one? Whoops. Okay. All right. After 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Take us to the river. Take us there in peace to sing the song of your salvation. To win this generation for our King, the song of your forgiveness. For it is with grace that river flows. Take us to the river in the city of our God. Take us to your throne room. forgot we did this morning, but oh well. 160. Light up the fire. Not 3. Okay, after 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Light up the fire, let the flame burn. Open the door, let Jesus return. Take sweet of His Spirit, let the fruit grow. Tell the people of Jesus. Just the ladies. Now the men. All together, no music. Light up the fire, let the flame burn. Open the door, let Jesus return. Take seed of His Spirit, let the fruit grow. Tell the people of Jesus and let His love show. Light up the fire, let the flame burn. Open the door, let Jesus return. Take seed of His Spirit, let the fruit grow. Tell the people of Jesus and let His love show. Okay, 164. This is good fun. No, it's not. Lively one. Then we sing one more, and then we'll hand over to Tobias. Okay. Jesus, keep me as the apple. After 3. 1, 2, 3. Jesus, keep me as the apple of my eye. Right under the shadow of Thy wings. Now I long can save me as I die. Jesus, keep me as the apple of my eye. And again. Jesus, keep me as the apple of my eye. Right under the shadow of Thy wings. Now I long can save me as I die. Jesus, keep me as the apple of my eye. Okay, one more. Sorry. Finish on 49. Lay up treasure. Okay. After 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Lay up treasure in heaven. Life will pass away, away. Lay up treasure in abundant measure for the great accounting day. Lay up treasure in heaven. Though men count you poor, thou shalt reign with the sons of God forevermore. And again. Lay up treasure in heaven. Life will pass away. Lay up treasure in abundant measure for the great accounting day. Lay up treasure in heaven. Though men count you poor, thou shalt reign with the sons of God forevermore. Thanks, band, and Toby.
Hello everyone. A couple of you might have heard a shorter version of this talk if you're at Island Camp. I'm just going to talk about trimming the fat in our lives. And there's a story of I'm going to use to sort of relate to the talk. It's about expeditions into the Antarctic. And there was in 1911 there was 2 sort of leaders of their own Antarctic expedition parties. The one British was Robert Scott, Captain Robert Scott, and a Norwegian fella called Roald Amundsen. And these two ended up in a bit of a race towards the South Pole. It was the South Pole had not yet been reached by foot, and they were both trying to complete this at the same time, and it became a bit of a race. And in history, one of these is known to be a success, and one turned out to be quite a failure. So I'm going to show a video, I'll just get it up, about this, about a 5-minute video.
Everyone in this photo died soon after it was taken. These are British explorers standing at the South Pole in January 1912. The photo marks the finish line of a race into the unknown. Two teams, one British, one Norwegian, trekked 900 miles into brutal territory and had to get back to safety before winter hit. And at first glance, this looks like a victory photo for the British, except that is the Norwegian flag, and it only gets worse from here. Robert Falcon Scott was a meticulous planner, and his dream was to be the first person to reach the South Pole. He and his English team of explorers and scientists had been conducting research in Antarctica and collected years of data on seasonal cycles on the continent. These lines show what they estimated average temperatures would be throughout the year, with summer ranging from around 30 to -10 degrees Fahrenheit and huge drops beginning around April. Remember this chart because later it will help us understand Scott's decision-making. Scott planned to use pony transport for the first 425 miles across the Ross Ice Shelf, shoot them at the base of the Beardmore Glacier, and finish the rest of the journey on foot, which included a 125-mile hike across the top of the glacier, 350 more miles to the pole, and all the way back again, all while hauling hundreds of pounds of equipment. Using ponies and brute strength made sense to Scott at the time. British explorers had used this method to haul equipment during an earlier attempt on the South Pole. Plus, the English didn't have experience with the other good option, dog teams. And they believed man-hauling was the surest way to make the tricky climb up the glacier and onto the polar plateau, where the South Pole sits. It was hard, slow work, but the route they were on had reached the plateau before, and it seemed to be worth the effort. But Scott's team wasn't alone. Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen was camped nearby, and he wanted to get to the pole first. The Norwegian team, all of them expert skiers, knew how to travel in cold conditions. And to make matters worse for the English, Amundsen had dogs, and he knew how to use them. News of the Norwegians' last-minute bid worried Scott, but he was still optimistic. Amundsen had started about 60 miles closer to the pole, but was taking a route not yet proven to be passable. Coming against an unknown obstacle or falling into an unmarked crevasse could end his attempt prematurely. But that's not how it happened. By the time Scott reached his goal, Amundsen's flag was there waiting for him. The Norwegians and their dogs had comfortably reached the pole 5 weeks earlier and were almost back to their starting point by the time the English arrived. Scott and his team were heartbroken. They took this photo outside of Amundsen's tent the day they started their long journey back. Scott wrote, "Left a note to say I had visited the tent with companions, Bowers photographing and Wilson sketching. We've turned our back now on the goal of our ambition and must face our 800 miles of solid dragging, and goodbye to most of the daydreams." This is where the trouble really begins. It's mid-January in this photo, still the height of the Antarctic summer. Told you this chart was coming back. According to their research, the team had about 3 months left before temperatures on the Ross Ice Shelf, the last leg of the journey back, would drop to deadly levels. That left plenty of time to make the long trek on foot. But this isn't what happened in 1912. This is that average line again, and these are the temperatures Scott's party endured that summer. Consecutive days of temperatures around -40 degrees Fahrenheit. Those conditions at prolonged exposure are not survivable. The first man died here. He collapsed and soon went comatose following several falls on the glacier. The next man died about a month later, after a crippling frostbite in his hands and feet began hurting the team's progress and their chances of survival. Nearly unable to walk, he left the tent and sacrificed himself to a snowstorm. The last three, including Scott, made it here before getting trapped in their tent by a blizzard, just 11 miles from the supply depot that would have saved their lives. The tent, along with the bodies, journals, and photographs, was found 8 months later by a search team. As time went on, Scott's legacy vacillated between fearless explorer and bumbling fool who tried to take ponies into the Antarctic. But the thing is, his plan should have worked. Measurements from modern weather stations along his route show the predictions he was relying on were impressively accurate. What Scott couldn't have known is that 1912 was an anomaly. The temperatures his party suffered through occur roughly once every 15 years, turning an already risky venture into a hopeless one. The photo they took outside of Amundsen's tent was meant to be a gentlemanly admission of defeat at the end of a long race. But instead, it was the starting line of a race they didn't see coming, a desperate attempt to escape from the coldest place on Earth. Darkroom.
It's a pretty interesting story, isn't it? A pretty sad story, what happened to the British men there. But just what I sort of thought about that story when I first heard it was just the two different ways they went about how they were going to do the expedition. So Scott, a few things extra that wasn't shown in the video there. He took a lot of extra men on the expedition, sort of that he might not have need to have taken, not on the actual walk, but on the cruise down there and sort of the initial part before they start the walk. They had a bit less experience in those conditions. They wore different clothing that probably wasn't as well suited as what the Norwegians had. You saw there that they used horses to tow the equipment. I think it does. I've read they have some dogs as backup, but the horses really weren't suited to those. Or it was a particularly bad winter, so it just didn't turn out well to use the horses. And they also had a lot of things they had to lug with them, and that really slowed them down because the horses weren't doing well in those conditions, and they ended up having to pull it a lot of the way themselves, and they had so much stuff. And on the other hand, the Norwegians, they had a sort of a skeleton crew of very experienced navigators, and they sort of just took what they needed, and they had the right equipment. They used dogs. They used dogs instead of horses. Also, you read that their food, the choices of food that they put in their bodies for the nutrition they needed in those kind of conditions was a bit smarter and a bit much better. So the comparison between those two, you can bring out a few points from that. I find is that you can apply to your walk in the Lord is that about checking your bearings. Pastor Steve mentioned last week about when you're aiming at the target, and if you start just a little bit off, by the time it flies along, it's a long way off by the time it goes down the range. And similarly, just a slight adjustment will mean you're bang on target as well. About traveling light in your life in the Lord, that you just remembering that you only need the basic things in your life to survive, but the Lord's what's important. And also what you're putting in your body on your journey, what are you eating, makes a big difference to your walk as well. So it's quite a good comparison to our walk in the Lord. So we'll start with the first point. It's about checking your bearings in the Lord. We'll turn to 2 Samuel chapter 12. The good thing about life in the Lord is that when you're off course, we have the Holy Spirit, and normally through experience, when you're a bit off, when you feel like you could be doing some things better in the Lord, or you're a bit off, you feel the Lord sort of poking you in the back and tapping you on the shoulder and saying, you sort of know, your spirit sort of tells you that you don't feel quite right. So it's great that we have that in the Lord. The Lord will tell you when you're a little bit off course. In this story here is about David, and he was off course, a lot off course. He had an affair with Bathsheba. He'd sent her husband in to die in battle, Uriah, and so God sends Nathan to tap him on the shoulder and tell him he's done the wrong thing. So 2 Samuel 12 in verse 13, we'll read, "And David said unto Nathan, I've sinned against the Lord. And Nathan said unto David, The Lord also hath put away thy sin, thou shalt not die. Howbeit, because by this deed thou hast given great occasion to the enemies of the Lord to blaspheme, the child also that is born unto thee shall surely die. And Nathan departed unto his house, and the Lord struck the child that Uriah's wife bare unto David, and it was very sick. David therefore besought God for the child, and David fasted, and went in and lay all night upon the earth. And the elders of his house arose and went to him to raise him up from the earth, but he would not, neither did he eat bread with them. And it came to pass on the 7th day that the child died, and the servants of David feared to tell him that the child was dead, for they said, Behold, while the child was yet alive, we spake unto him, and he would not hearken unto our voice. How will he then vex himself if we tell him that the child is dead? But when David saw his servants whispered, David perceived that the child was dead. Therefore David said unto his servants, Is the child dead? And they said, Yes, he is dead. Then David arose from the earth and washed and anointed himself and changed his apparel and came into the house of the Lord and worshipped. And he came to his own house, and when he required, they sat bread before him, and he did eat. We'll just stop there. What I just want to focus on in that story is David's reaction to hearing that he'd done the wrong thing. Is just that he thought, he straight away realised, and he sort of reset himself on the Lord's path, and he put everything else away, trimmed everything else out, and he just sought the Lord, and he prayed. He prayed. I don't know where it says how long, but he prayed for a long time. He just put everything out of his life, and he thought, right, I need to reset myself. And he's really trimming out the fat in his life, I suppose. He's saying, I've done the wrong thing. I want to get back right with the Lord. And that's the great thing about the Lord, is he corrects us. In Hebrews 12, it says, we won't turn there, but it says, no chastisement at the time is joyous, but grievous. But it brings about peaceable fruit of righteousness. And it's not nice. I had a little note written here. Last night, Noah did something. I think he did something quite slightly naughty. I think he smacked Lauren or something. And Lauren said, "Okay, you've got to correct the behaviour." And she popped him down on the carpet, and he was upset. He was crying, and Chloe couldn't handle the crying. She just wants to pick him up and comfort him for his bad behaviour, But Lauren said, "No, leave him, or you'll end up with a child, a 15-year-old that dictates your life, and it's just a rat bag." And sure enough, after 5 minutes, he's calmed down, and he's really, cute. And then he's come up, and you can sort of see in his eyes that he's like, I've done the wrong thing, but I've had my little, time of chastisement, and then it's all good again. And he learns, and he's better, and he doesn't do that anymore. And it's just a good thing. And that's what the Lord's like with us. He's not trying to punish you. Another good thing I've learned the Lord is that the Lord is, you forget sometimes, the Lord is not human. He doesn't behave the way that we would if someone wrongs you. He doesn't hold grudges or hold grievances, because says my ways are not your ways. He's above all that, where sometimes we haven't been praying enough, we haven't done this or that enough in the Lord. He's not going to hold that against you or say, oh, that's it, I'm not listening to you anymore. It's just the Lord doesn't do that. The Lord is God, and he doesn't hold grievances like that. And you read on in that chapter, even though David made a mistake, in verse 24, we'll just read that verse. And David comforted Bathsheba his wife, and went in unto her and lay with her, and she bare a son, and he called his name Solomon, and the Lord loved him. And we know that Solomon goes on to be extremely blessed by the Lord. So when we reset your bearings onto the Lord, it's usually not as drastic as this, but it's every time we reset, that's a good thing, and the Lord blesses that. Another analogy I've seen is of our walk in the Lord, is that your walk in the Lord needs some ups and downs, and your walk in the Lord is rarely a straight line. You have little dips and little ups and that sort of thing, but we like to keep it fairly steady if you can. But someone compares your walk in the Lord to a heartbeat monitor. So when you see on the heartbeat monitor, it's flat, and then it spikes. When your heart beats, it spikes up, and then it drops down, and then it comes back to level again. And this analogy says, if you, in your walk in the Lord, if it was just flat and there weren't any ups and downs in your walk, if it was just flat, when a heartbeat monitor is just flat, that means you're dead. You've actually passed away when you get the solid beep and you get no beats. But when you have those ups and downs, they make you reset yourself on the Lord. They're actually healthy. So we should look at them as healthy opportunities to reset yourself. We'll turn to Philippians chapter 4. In that story, Robert Scott had a lot of materials and a lot of sleds and a lot of stuff weighing him down. They ended up having to drag a lot of it themselves, and it was extremely hard for them. And that's exactly the same for us. Sometimes when we carry too much natural thoughts and natural things in our lives, it's very hard to focus on the Lord first. We'll read in verse 11, Philippians 4 verse 11. Not that I speak in respect of want, for I have learned in whatsoever state I am therewith to be content. I know both how to be abased and how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I am instructed both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and suffer need. I can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth me. We know Paul had big ups and downs in his life. He says elsewhere that he said, I've had good times where I've been treated really well and put up really well. I think when he's in Rome, he's living well. And he's been shipwrecked, and he's been multiple times, and he's been whipped and all sorts. So it says here, I've been abased and I've abounded as well. But I'm trying to keep myself steady, and it's Christ that strengthens him. He doesn't say that it's his possessions or his circumstances that strengthens him. It's Christ that strengthens him. So if you look for God to be the one that strengthens you in your walk and not your circumstance, then through experience we all know that that's actually what keeps you steady, and that's actually the peace of mind that we all want, is that only God can give. We were just talking at lunch about there's this TV. People these days, they really love this idea of trimming the fat, like I'm talking about here, about getting away. There's shows about Escape to the Country, or shows where people move away from the city and want to live a simpler life out somewhere else. We were speaking at lunch. There's a whole show based about this lady, little Japanese lady, who declutters people's homes for them, and people that can't seem to be able to throw away things, she says, I'll come in, and she says, does it bring you joy? What is it? Does it spark joy? She says, does it spark joy? And they say yes or no, and if it doesn't, they get rid of it. And it's good. It's quite a good thing, It does. Are these things help in your walk, in your life? Are you a bit too busy, or are you a bit weighed down? Is it making you joyous in the Lord? Is it making you happy? Is it helping your walk? And there's usually, almost always, there's some things we could definitely trim out in life that just sort of weigh you down a bit. In verse 8 of chapter 3 of Philippians 3:8, just over the page, it says, Paul saying, yea, doubtless, and I count all things but loss for the excellency of the knowledge of Christ Jesus my Lord, for whom I have suffered the loss of all things, and do count them but dung, that I may win Christ. Same as he's saying in the next chapter. That's his main focus, and that's why he's able to be content. Okay, flick back over to Philippians 4, just over the page again. And another point that wasn't shown in the video, but in that story that I've read up on, is the nutrition side of it. That the British had a certain type of food they were eating. It's biscuits of pure wheat flour. Apparently they had not enough vitamin B in them, and they ended up getting nervous disorders and getting quite sick, and didn't have, and the struggling with energy on that home journey. And on the other hand, the Norwegians had better food that had that vitamin B and different things they needed in it, basically, to get them through. So what you're putting in your body, what they were putting in their body, made a big difference. And same for us, what you're putting in your spiritual body makes a difference as well. In Philippians 4, chapter 6, Philippians 4, verse 6, be careful for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God. And the peace of God, which passes all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Jesus Christ. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, honest, just, pure, lovely, of a good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things, those things which you have both learned and received and heard and seen in me do, and the God of peace shall be with you. So that's basically the Lord saying it simply to you, that when you focus on just all the good things, putting the good things in your body, you get good things out of it. Same as, naturally, eating the right foods and dieting, which is so hard to do, but it reaps the rewards. You feel better, and it's better for you, and you need to just give that little initial push and to put the right things in your body. So I suppose you could just ask yourself, what do you put in your spiritual body? Are you praying enough? Are you are you talking about the Lord to people when you see that opportunity? And I suppose looking for those opportunities to start eating more of the right things in your spiritual walk is important. We'll just finish off in 1 Timothy chapter 6. Verse 6. But godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we carry nothing out. And having food and raiment, let us be therewith content. And that's pretty simply said as well, that if we try and live godly, if we try and be content with what we have and know that you don't carry any of it with you to lay up your treasure in heaven, that's where you get the great gain, you get that great contentment from. Every time we come to the meeting and we pray to the Lord and we read, you are resetting your bearings on the Lord, and that's important to do. That's why, as we often say, that it's hard to survive on your own. If you're not coming to meetings and you think, I can still survive, but that's why we come together, because it's really hard without each other, to sharpen each other, and to have that fellowship to stay, to stay sharp and to stay, have your bearings on the Lord, and that's where your goal is. So there's that, resetting your bearing. If you've got some things that you feel like you've got too many things in your backpack, then just offload some things, trim some of the fat in your life, focus on the Lord first, and start putting on some spiritual weight if you're a bit hungry, if you're not eating the right things as well. And when we relate it to that story, that's just the important things in that story was checking your bearings, travelling light, eating right, and then your journey in the Lord is the best one when you're doing that. And all the people said, all right. Pastor Steve, do you have anything to finish off with? Okay, we'll just close in prayer then. If we could ask Glenn, if that's all right, just close in prayer. Hallelujah. Praise you, Lord. Thanks, Jesus.
Hallelujah, Lord. It's a privilege to come into your courts, Lord, and hear your word there today, Lord. And we just pray, Lord, that we take heed to it, Lord, and that it would stir us up, Lord, by your Spirit, Lord, and we can go out, Lord, edified, Lord, and built up, Lord, to do your work, to do your will, Lord, and to have a good day in Jesus' name.
Praise you, Lord. Hallelujah. Praise Jesus. Hallelujah. Amen.
So excuse me everybody, just a quick one. When we were over there in Barbados, there's a few people who might be Skyping in or watching on the live stream. So I said we'd all just say hi. So if you could all just say hi. I don't know whether the camera's up there. The camera's over there. There we go. Okay. Thanks very much. All the best, guys.